This is Change, the Conversation. I'm Natalia Loback, founder and principal of Chart House Advisory Services, and I'm here today with Nadine Araxi, who is a writer, a story coach, and a marketing savant. We're back for our second conversation. Welcome back.
Yay!
So we got in deep in our last conversation. Where we left off was around, stories can be changed. And what's amazing is that, and this is where I love the work that we both do, because as you're talking about a restructuring, you're talking about, these things happening in organizations and people telling themselves very negative stories to help them deal with their fear. How can stories change, Nadine? And how have you seen that happen?
Oh, wow. Well, story change is very intentional work, as you know, to really address the stories within ourselves, those deep-rooted ones, the ones that keep us stuck, the ones that keep us from feeling empowered or building, trust in self or confidence in self. Those ones are persnickety. But there are frameworks, obviously, that help. But really, it's about looking at what is a story to begin with, right? If I say, I'm not a morning person, that's a story. Stories are everywhere. They're rooted in almost all of our thoughts. And the thing about stories is, to your point, you can rewrite them. I am divorced. I had a happily ever after story that was built from, years of watching Friends and Disney movies and rom-coms and, anyone Gen X-ish or older millennial has been exposed to this, right? Women in particular.
And one of our favorites, The Little Mermaid. Did we both not all, I know. Yes.
Such great songs, but that story.
Oh, right.
Or Love Actually. I think we talked about that.
Oh, we did talk. Yes, for those of you who are watching, we both used to love Actually. Watch it again with new eyes.
Yeah, with present day eyes. And so I think that, looking at the stories, when you feel resistance to something, identifying it, and in an organization, resistance can come from all over when you're in the midst of change. But as leaders, to understand your own resistance, right? Because sometimes we're asked to share messages that we're not 100% behind. Mm-hmm. And so trying to understand, do a brain dump of the stories that are emerging around this change and look at, what do I know to be true? Do I absolutely know this to be true? If they fact check this in the Globe and Mail or the New York Times, would everyone agree, yep, that's a fact? Or is it my opinion, right? Am I bringing emotions and judgment to this story? Am I saying it's good or bad? Am I saying something is a failure, or am I saying it's a success? And how do I know that? And work through your data. What data do I have to support that this is true? That is a really rich, fertile ground for understanding the early stages of change and why you might be feeling resistant or why you're buying in, right? It's also important. We've just seen our whole country go through this where the government is telling us to do something. It is probably healthy to be critical of our government, to use our critical thinking skills. And at the same time, you can go too far on one side or the other, right? As we've seen. Exactly. So how do we navigate that? Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's so interesting because when I'm working with resistance, resistance to change is one of the more thorny areas of change management. And there's a lot of different, theories about what works well, what doesn't work well, that kind of stuff. And a lot of times understanding where those who are resistant are coming from and really listening to the story gives you some inroads to ask questions and start to think about, well, how can we challenge those beliefs in a really gentle and kind and sort of compassionate way? So not, creating that villain and hero storyline, but creating that option to maybe rethink or think about things differently. is a tool that I use quite often, actually, especially with resistance related to power structure. Because a lot of times when people feel like they're losing power, they become very resistant, they become very afraid. And so helping to rewrite the story about what are the ways through that, how do you still maintain a strong identity, a strong sense of self through a change that you may be viewing as something that's really, really scary or really awful.
Totally. I think going to, in coaching, some of the tools we use are like, what's good about this? Right? And there is, right? What's good about this can be very powerful. What happens if I make a different choice? You're in a moment, you're at a crossroads. What happens if I make a different choice? Exploring that, focusing more on what you want than what you don't want. Often when we're in a time of change and we're feeling resistance, we're thinking, well, I don't want that, and I don't want to do that. And this entitlement shows up, or this indignant, we say like the angry toddler or the indignant teenager. And, check in with yourself, like, what is that about? Because there's a lot of, not to make this political, but if you look at the trucker convoy story, for example, like, it's a lot of don't tell me what to do attitude. And that comes from our early stories, our lived experiences, where we felt like we didn't have autonomy and agency. And that very much shows up when you're going through a layoff or a leadership change or a regime change, or, your industry's in flux, 20 years of media with the on-ramping of technology at a crazy pace. Oh, I don't want to use that word crazy, but at a very intense pace. And I think that, I've watched it. I had a front row seat for that. And there's so much resistance. There's always going to be the people that are like, well, we tried that in the past and it didn't work. And they just shut down the possibility. And I would encourage you that if you're getting to a point where you are seeing things as we've tried that in the past and it didn't work, or we've always done it this way, to say, and yes, and, it's a thing from improv, like, we've always done it this way, and so now what?
Exactly.
Right? We tried it before and it didn't work. What are we going to do differently this time? Is there a possibility where it does work, and why? So it's so much of storytelling is around being curious and asking questions and investigating to see, like, is the story true? And then sometimes you need to intentionally create a story that empowers or moves culture forward, moves, the business forward. And so making sure that it's a story that everyone can buy into. Not by ignoring, right? Like, so using the layoffs as an example, like not ignoring people's pain, actually acknowledging it, and like your own guilt as the leader for having to do that awful thing, which no one loves doing, right? No. Even when the employee you have to let go, you have really good reasons to let them go. It does not feel good. So acknowledging that in yourself, acknowledging the pain in the people whom you're asking to change, and then yes, there's pain here. Yes, it's been unpleasant. And now what?
Exactly. And now what? And there's your opportunity. Rewrite, start a new story. Where can we go from there?
Yeah.
Nadine, I have loved this conversation. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I think we're going to be back for one more.
Oh, yay.
Okay. Thanks you so much.